ABC's chief global affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz and ABC News contributor retired Colonel Steve Ganyard. Good morning to you both. Thanks for joining us. Martha, I do want to start with you. I know you've been talking to your sources this morning. What more are you learning about how this operation was carried out?
Well, Whit, I think we have to go back to just those scenes in Caracas with U.S. helicopters, Chinook helicopters, and attack helicopters sweeping over the city. Those explosions, likely at airfields and military facilities, and Delta Force, that elite Delta Force, going in and grabbing Maduro and his wife in the dead of night. You can imagine they were probably asleep. And how this operation was carried out exactly, we do not know. They were clearly well prepared. They knew exactly where to find Maduro and his wife. We are told by sources that the CIA had perfect intelligence as to where they were, and that clearly was the case since they did capture them. We also don't know whether others were involved on the ground, whether the CIA perhaps had assets, whether he called in and said, "I'm going to surrender." We do not know those details at this point, but Delta Force had a successful mission. They went in, they grabbed Maduro. Whether he surrendered or not, we do not know, but it certainly did seem a great surprise. And with those military assets, it tells you that Maduro did not know what was coming, and he was flown out of the country. I think it's highly unlikely there are still forces on the ground. Generally, these missions are done, and the Delta Force and the others are out of there. But those scenes from Caracas and those explosions and the smoke rising from that city are remarkable indeed, Whit.
Yes, they are, absolutely. Let's bring in Colonel Steve Ganyard. And Steve, President Maduro, as we noted there, and his wife both captured. Where could they be taken, and what happens next?
Yeah, Whit, probably, you saw in the video there, you saw those special operations helicopters, so they probably would have put him on one of the special operations, the Army Delta Force helicopters, and flown him offshore. Now, whether they had enough gas to get all the way out to where the USS Ford, the aircraft carrier, is, that's a question. But from the Ford, they can fly him all the way to the United States, perhaps stopping in Roosevelt Roads in Puerto Rico, where the U.S. buildup has been most apparent. But right now, it becomes a law enforcement issue, and he will be tried based on those the indictment back in 2020. So this may be, as Secretary Rubio said, this may be the end of the military action or what was necessary. No doubt the U.S. will keep the forces offshore to make sure that probably the next step is going to be free and fair elections. Remember that one of the opposition leaders was just awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo, and so the hope here is that the Venezuelan people could actually have an elected leader.
And Martha, a foreign leader captured, flown out of the country. Just how unprecedented is an operation like this from the U.S. perspective?
Well, I think we remember back to 1990 in Panama. Manuel Noriega was taken by U.S. troops. That was an invasion of Panama, however, and Manuel Noriega was not ever really the elected president. He was a military dictator. He eventually surrendered. He went to the embassy, the Holy See Embassy, the Vatican Embassy, and hid out there for about 10 days before he surrendered. I also want to bring up Juan Hernandez, who was in Honduras, and he was convicted of drug trafficking. In fact, the Justice Department said he was at the center of the largest and most violent drug trafficking conspiracy in the world, helping to bring 400 tons of cocaine into the U.S. He was recently given a full pardon at the end of November by President Trump. So we have that convicted criminal who was released by President Trump, and now overnight, this arrest and capture of Venezuela's president.
Yeah, we've seen a number of people pointing out that contradiction. And Steve, the Trump administration also has accused Maduro himself of narco-terrorism. Why then has there been this recent escalation with Venezuela?
Well, the Trump administration has an idea that they call the Trump corollary, and that is an extension of the old Monroe Doctrine. That is a re-emphasis on security in the Western Hemisphere. And so the White House sees Venezuela as the source of many problems, not only in South America, not only in the Western Hemisphere, but around the world because of their connections to Hezbollah, to the oil that gets shipped offshore and helps keep the Russian war machine going in Ukraine. And so given the connection between drugs and illicit oil transfers, the administration says now is the time to stop this, because the next step is where does the Cuban situation fit into all this, which is also propped up by Venezuelan oil.
And how the country will run and what happens to the people of Venezuela. Many questions going forward. Steve Ganyard, Martha Raddatz, thank you so much. We appreciate it.